Jason, welcome to Millionaire University. I'm so delighted to have you here today. Cannot wait to hear everything you're going to share with our audience. So thanks for taking time presenting this masterclass for our listeners. Super excited to get to know you.
Super pumped to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Give us a little background into you. I know you're a coach. Give us kind of the timeline of entrepreneurship for you all the way up to what you're doing right now.
So I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I've always been this weird online marketing nerd. Like when I was 13 years old, I was obsessed with computers, and I used to study programming and learn how to program. I was one of those weird kids that like my mom was like, go outside, go play. And I was like, no, I want to learn how to do computer programming. So my first official online business was I used to play a lot of video games as a kid. And this was like the era where you had to put the CD in the computer in order to play the game, which some people listening might remember what a CD is, maybe not. But it used to frustrate me that I'd have to find these CDs in order to play my favorite games because they were always under the couch cushion or somewhere like stuffed in the closet. And it would take me like 20 minutes to figure out where these CDs were in order to play the game that I wanted to play. So I created this software program one summer that basically made it so that it would trick the computer into thinking there was a CD in the drive. So I could play my favorite games without having to hunt for the CD. And I spent months building this thing, and I had to ask my dad to set up a payment processor because I couldn't sign up for it because I was 13. And I launched this thing online, and I'll never forget opening my email and getting that first "you've made a sale" email in my inbox. And just the feeling of excitement in that moment of, wow, I've created this thing. I put it out in the world. This stranger that I have no idea who they are bought it on the other side of the planet. They can get value from this. I can help make their life better. I get paid, which is pretty awesome, being a 13-year-old making money online. And I was hooked ever since then. So it's been 20 years since then. But my passion for online marketing has really never changed. And that took me through several different roles: a director of sales, building my own coaching business, helping musicians initially, then becoming a business coach and helping other people grow and scale online businesses. So I've just been obsessed about this. I love getting to help entrepreneurs who've got traction grow, who want to get to the next level, really unlock the keys in their businesses to be able to do that online. And it is the best job in the world.
I agree with you. I'm in the similar niche, the similar world, and I 100% agree. And I think I loved hearing your first step into entrepreneurship, and I love the description of that first sale. I think everybody listening, whether you have had that moment or not, you can feel the reality of that. And we want everybody to have that moment because it's the rush and it's the thing that propels you forward into years and years and years of entrepreneurship. There's just nothing like it. Even every time I create a new offer or I become a new affiliate for a product and you see that first conversion, I still get so excited. I'm like, this is amazing that this works. Like, we can make money doing this. Like, are you guys seeing what's happening? It's absolutely amazing. And then when you couple that with coaching, where there's a little more personal connection and you can see the tools and the things you provide actually help somebody achieve the same results, to me, that's the level up of all level ups. It's so fun to watch other people progress, which is why I'm sitting here bringing these episodes to people, because I want them to have that same rush. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm actually quite impressed that at 13, you were able to create something like that. Because I'm thinking 20 years ago, like, what was I doing 20 years ago? Definitely not doing software development. But
my mom probably would have said, you should go outside more, but
go touch grass.
It was what I wanted to do. So
yeah, well, it's paid off. So that's incredible. Let's talk about what we're going to share with everybody today, because like you said, you're a successful coach. You've been able to help other people to build their businesses. And so I want to talk today a little bit about how that's possible, how we can scale past maybe that first 6 figures into multiple 6 figures, even 7 figures. I think there's a fear a lot of people have when they're in a service-based business that means there's going to have to be so much more output. There's going to have to be a huge team. And I honestly, even as like a mom, there's been this thing about being a CEO and managing other people that feels scarier than even the coaching itself. So talk us through that a little bit and how you transitioned and made number one coaching successful. And then let's start to break that down for our listeners.
Yeah, I love what you just said, because it's a common block and fear that so many service-based online business, even people who aren't selling a service, have, which is making more money means working harder. That's the belief. And it makes sense. I mean, most of us came from a 9-to-5 world or some kind of world where we were trading time for money. And so we bring that mindset into business. And many six-figure entrepreneurs that I mentor and work with, the thing that generally got you to six figures is hustle, a lot of hard work, a lot of being in the trenches, solving problems, doing everything yourself. You don't have any money really, so you're just trying to figure out how to build Facebook ads and build funnels and do all these things through YouTube videos. And so we have this mindset, which I think is actually really helpful and useful when you're in the earlier stages of the business, but starts to break down around that six-figure level. And so I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are at that level who are burned out. They're working like 50, 60 hours a week. And the idea of growing a business beyond that point with that mindset feels overwhelming, understandably, because it's like, well, I can't work harder. I can't work 80 hours a week. I got a family. I want freedom. Most of us did this because we wanted freedom in the first place. And yet we end up in a business working more than we did when we were working at a 9 to 5, right? So I think the first thing is looking at that mindset and actually questioning it. Like most people don't actually question that mindset, but it's like, is it true that in order to make more money or scale or grow my business, I have to work harder? That's the first step, is just that questioning or that curiosity. What happened for me when I was in the early days of growing my first coaching business and I hit six figures, I remember I had a close friend of mine who was scaling and growing his business. When we first started, we were at around the same level and we were both making around six figures. And then over the course of several months, in a very short period of time, he went from making six figures to hitting his first $200,000 a month. And I watched him behind the scenes go through that journey. And what was fascinating was he wasn't working any harder than me. He was actually working less. He would tell you, if he were here, and we're still friends today, he would say, Jason, I'm kind of lazy, you know? I actually have this mindset where like I do things kind of half done most of the time. Like I'm not working 60 hours a week. So being surrounded by him was really my first exposure to, okay, like here I am, I'm working harder than him and he's making so much more money than me. Like, what am I missing? And when I started hanging out with more multi-six, seven-figure, eight-figure entrepreneurs, what I realized was it really wasn't about working harder. Most of those entrepreneurs were actually working less than me. It was really about creating leverage. And we can dive into that a little bit more. But to me, that is the key to being able to grow and scale without burning out and reclaiming your time and your freedom. And when I started to understand that shift and think about my time differently and how I was showing up in my business and shift from more of this like operator mindset where I was doing everything myself to the CEO, to the leader, to the person who builds systems and empowers other people on my team that I was growing at that point to be able to help me, that was when things really shifted. And so we can dive into that on a deeper level, but high level, I think those are some of the shifts that need to happen in order to get out of that trap.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. You know, it's interesting how in my journey as an entrepreneur, I've been in all the stages. And every time you start again, and I don't want to say start over, but it's kind of starting again, whether that's introducing a whole new offer, maybe you rebrand, there's an evolution, right? So things that I did to make my first $1 million, I'm no longer doing. I'm on a totally different plan. And it's funny how even knowing that, you come back into the beginning and there's this fear of, oh my gosh, I'm always going to have to work this hard. I'm always going to have to grind. It's always going to take this long to make content, to write emails, whatever it may be. And you have to remember, and you have to take our word for it if you're listening and you haven't made it past that point, that there really is a next season. I compare it to parenting. I remember when I had toddlers, I genuinely forgot that they were going to get older. Like it just felt like this was going to be my life every single day until the day I died. I was going to be taking care of babies and changing diapers. And I think you need to hear that nudge from people who are on the other side of it. And we need to be reminded of it ourselves too when we're in the beginning building stages. And so that being said, even when you're in that point where you said it's really healthy, it's really important that when you're in the early seasons of building something, service-based or not, you understand that, yes, there's going to be a time and a season for you to have to do a lot of it yourself. But that being said, are there things that you recommend even now to people who might be in your audience or might be working up to six figures that maybe you yourself would go back and say, oh, I would have probably tweaked this a little bit because I didn't even need to be working that hard in the early season? Any recommendations for those who are just in the starting out part?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I find from working with folks at that stage and really all across the board is we're really good at making things complicated. Like my mind wants to make things very complicated. So for example, I was just mentoring someone. I was on a coaching call earlier this week. And she's an entrepreneur, very successful, but doing a lot of in-person events. And I asked her, and we were diving into this, and she's like, I feel like this strategy is kind of working, but it's taking up so much of my time, and these events feel like such a heavy lift. And I asked her, I said, how much time does it take you to prepare for one of these live events? And she said it takes 10 hours on average. And so we looked at that on a deeper level, and I said, well, what are you doing preparing? We unpacked that, and she said, I'm coming up with all this curriculum that I'm going to teach, because she has a background as a teacher. And I was like, what do your people really want and find valuable out of those events? And she thought about it for a bit, and she was like, you know what? And she helps moms. She's a coach. She helps moms who are struggling with their relationship with their kids. And she was like, you know what these moms really value is just showing up in an environment where they can bring what's alive for them in that moment, what they're struggling with that week, to the table, and just feel seen and heard and be in a group where they feel like they're not alone. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So you're spending 10 hours preparing for these live workshops, when it sounds like the thing that these women actually really value is just showing up and being able to share what's going on for them. And if you were to restructure this entire thing, you could probably run a workshop that's even more valuable without any preparation, because you could just show up and say, hey, let's talk about what's alive for you right now. And so I see this all the time with entrepreneurs. It's we turn the thing that could take 30 minutes into like a 10-hour task. And so there's a couple of coaching questions I love, and I use these all the time in my own business. They're also questions that I'll often give clients. One is, how can I make this easy? That's a question I ask myself all the time. Whenever I'm about to run a live training or workshop or launch a new offer, I just run it through that question. And that's a great way to filter out all of the stuff that you think you need to do, but probably isn't adding value. And then another great question is, what's the minimum viable product that I can put together? Many of your listeners will probably be familiar with the Lean Startup, or this methodology. If you've never read this book, if you're an entrepreneur, I think it's a great book. It's called The Lean Startup. And it talks about this idea, especially if you're in the early days of the business, where one of the biggest mistakes that I made when I was early on was I would spend like 3 months building an offer, and I would launch it, and then I would find out that it flopped and nobody wanted it because I was still trying to figure out what my market wanted. And this is very normal, that we launch things, we experiment, we test. A lot of what we do doesn't work as entrepreneurs. The problem isn't the failure. The problem is spending 3 months building something and then having it fail. So if I were to just ask myself that question, like, well, what do I actually need to build in order to just test? Like, what's the minimum viable thing that I could create just to put something out into the world? It's like, well, do I need to build any curriculum? Well, I could just run live calls, and I could just put together a 1-page Google Doc that outlines what I think the offer is going to be, and then go out there and sell it. And then once people buy it, then I can actually build it on the back end. And that way, instead of spending 3 months building an offer and then having it flop, I could spend 30 minutes building an offer and then learn that it wasn't what people wanted. So I think this mindset of minimum viable product, as well as how can I make it easy, at any stage of entrepreneurship is incredibly valuable, and will cut at least 50% of the stuff that you're doing that you think you need to do that just is a waste of time.
Preaching to the choir, at least on my end of the conversation. I know that our listeners are probably getting tons of value out of this too. I think, like I said, even though I've been through these cycles over and over, when you're in a starting over stage or you're doing something new, I have had to have these moments of realization for myself where I realize there's kind of an addiction to it being hard. And I know my husband and I have joked, like, we know too much. We wish we could just like compartmentalize and take this knowledge. And I think the tricky thing that I really try to be careful of too on these interviews and these episodes and all the information we provide to our listeners is there's so much information, and you have to find what's relevant to you right now. And so that's why I think it was really smart for us to break down, if they're in the beginning, this is what they need to consider. Because I think when you learn how to build a whole sales funnel, when you learn how to write a sales page, like you've felt like, well, that's what people are saying works. And it's for a different season. It's for a different stage. It's not that the information isn't good or applicable. It just might not be applicable right now. And for me, I burden myself with thinking, well, because I know how to do this, and this, I have to do the entire thing. Otherwise, I'm not leveraging all of my skills, right? Like I have to do a whole complicated funnel because I know how to, instead of just saying, my gosh, like what problem do I want to solve right now? And how can I do that in the simplest way? So I resonate with this so much because I personally am in a season of how can I make it easy? And there's an energetic resistance that comes up when I lean into that says, it's not allowed to be easy. Like
Yeah.
then you're not doing it right. It's supposed to be so many steps and you're supposed to sit at the computer for like 18 hours straight until your eyes bleed. And I've had this aha moment of, no, I don't think that's really what it's supposed, like who decided that it has to be 60 to 80 hour work weeks? Why can't I just have fun, create content for a few weeks, help people solve a problem, host a live coaching container? Amazing. I've made some money. I've helped people. And now I can take it to the next stage. So thank you for breaking that down. I have a little follow-up question to that, though, a little nitty-gritty. If somebody's promoting things like this, I think part of the reason it feels safe to go create all the back-end stuff is because if we're going to put that much work into it, we're going to sell something, we want it to be super good, and we don't want to waste our time. I run into this a lot with people that I work with, too. I don't want to put it out there if it's not going to work. I don't want to waste the time. When it comes to marketing, and you mentioned this, as entrepreneurs, we put things out all the time. Some don't work, some do. How do you help your clients go through the pivot to where maybe they are going to test something? They're going to spend a whole month talking about it on social media or paying money to run ads to it. What's kind of the mindset shift or even the strategy at play there so that it doesn't feel like, well, it didn't convert, so now it's all completely a waste? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's great to not spend 3 months building the offer, but even how do we remedy the fear of marketing something that we don't know is going to work? Because you never know.
Yeah, you don't. I would say at least, I mean, we're running an AI workshop on Friday. And I mean, it was the workshop itself. It's a free workshop. We have like 1,000 people signed up for it. It was a very successful launch, but I had a VIP tier that I had set up as a part of that launch where for like $147, they could upgrade. And it was like 3 or 4 days into the launch, we had like 600 people signed up for the actual free event and like 3 people signed up for the VIP tier. And I was like, this sucks. Like no one's buying this. And I pulled it. I just gave everyone a refund. I was like, hey, we're not going to do this because we're going to focus on the workshop instead. I still fail all the time. I mean, that happens. That's like a weekly thing. We'll launch stuff. It doesn't work. So I think over time for me, there's just been this mindset of like, of course, that's just a normal part of entrepreneurship. That's not a problem. The problem is when I take 3 months to build something and then I waste a bunch of time. So for me, I focus a lot on how do I speed up the feedback loop? Because I think that's the key question for a lot of entrepreneurs. It's not that we're really afraid of failure a lot of the time. It's we're afraid of putting in all this effort and time into something and then having it fail. So if I can make a launch like a really fast thing and just put something out there and then it flops, it's like it took me 20 minutes to build a landing page. Who cares? I'm just on to the next thing. There's also this mindset, I think, with higher level entrepreneurs. There's this lightness around how we hold offers. It's like, I got so many different things going on. If that fails, who cares? Like I'm focused on 5 other things over here. Just on to the next one, on to the next one. There's this lightness and this playfulness and this sense that nothing in my business is really all that important. And I think that's what I see with a lot of entrepreneurs that get stuck is there's this heaviness and this attachment to, it's like when you go on a date with someone and you're like, this needs to work. This needs to be the one. It's like if something goes wrong or it doesn't work out, it'll ruin you, But if you're like, I've got 5 dates this week and I'm just having a good time here. And if it happens, great. And if it doesn't, great. I think that's the mindset. And then the third thing I'll say is failure is super useful in a business because I learned a lot from that VIP launch this past week not going the way I wanted it to. I learned, hey, we just really didn't have a compelling enough offer for someone when they have a choice between free and $147. That $147 offer needs to be epic, and it wasn't epic enough for them to justify actually paying for it. So that was a super useful insight for me. And whenever something flops, I learned so much about my niche, about what they want, and that is insight and valuable learning that I can carry forward into my business to help me do what I do in the future even better. So it's super useful to fail. I don't even see it as a bad thing. It's just feedback.
Yeah, I agree with you. And yet I know there's this part of all of us, that ego, that like failure that we are trying to avoid that says otherwise. That's like, okay, that sounds all well and good, but I don't want information. I just want success, And so I think that's when we talk about getting tougher skin or making it light. It takes effort, right? It takes intention, and it's not just going to happen. but it can become, it's the difference between your business feeling like a job and feeling like fun. And I think that's even the season I'm in of, why am I doing this if I don't even look forward to it, if I'm not enjoying it? If I want impact for people and I really want to make a difference, then I have to enjoy it at every stage. I have to make it so that it doesn't feel like this heavy, awful thing that I'm carrying up the hill. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. You've broken that down so well. So let's talk about moving into that next season, how we start to create leverage that you mentioned as we're testing things out. Because after you do that, after you get the data, you start finding things click and it starts working, and you're able to get to that point where you're making, 6 figures, close to 6 figures. And then you hit that burnout point because you can test. And I think that's always a part of it. But there does hit a point where you're like, okay, we just have to have some longevity, right? We can't be launching new things every single month, because that's, I think, where you start to feel really frazzled and fried. So talk about what that next season looks like as you start to apply that leverage to all the effort that you put in the first part.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have this framework I call the CEO Freedom Formula. There's 3 steps to it, and this really walks through what you need to do in order to scale and grow a business. The first piece is actually an internal piece. The C in CEO Freedom Formula is claiming your CEO identity. And we talked about this a little bit before, but there's this shift in mindset that happens generally around that 6-figure level, where folks go from the operator, which is, I get my value from doing. My value comes from me being in the weeds in my business, from doing everything myself. I feel like no one else can do it better than me. I feel attached to control, and I feel like I'm the only one who can do all these things, so I do all them personally. And I don't have the money to hire people because I've got scarcity mindset, so I'm going to hang on to all these things and do everything myself. That is like the operator mindset. There's this shift in identity from there to the CEO mindset, which is, I'm building a business and I'm the owner of this business. I'm not the one who's on the ground floor doing all the work all the time. I might still play a role in that, but more and more I step back. I see my business as this higher level set of systems, is maybe a way of thinking about it. And I'm building team. I'm stepping out of the doing and creating an infrastructure that's basically larger than me. That's not an easy shift to make. And I feel like in many ways, I still feel like I'm like straddled between operator and owner. Because I still feel it with a part of me that wants to hang on to control and wants to do things myself. And it comes up all the time. So I think there's an internal shift that has to happen. And then once that happens, it becomes much easier to make the shifts in the business. But I think a lot of people are trying to change the business without changing themselves. It's like they're trying to build a 7-figure business with a 6-figure mindset. They're still stuck in the operator mindset. And that's why they're struggling or burning out, because they just try to do more. It's like, well, if I am working 50 hours a week right now, maybe I could work 80 hours a week and make more money. It doesn't work like that. So that's the first piece. And then we can definitely dive into more of like the practical external side of things too. But I think it really starts with that internal identity shift. And it really is a completely different way of thinking about what you do.
Yeah. Well, and I think we kind of touched on that a little bit, like you said in the beginning, where there's an ego tied up in it, there's the identity tied up in it, and there's this lack of safety, because there's control, there's safety and control, or at least we have this perception of safety and control, right? If I'm doing everything, then that's safer because I at least am the only one to blame. I don't have to manage and deal with other things. There might be a fear of leadership, of trusting other people, trusting yourself to lead other people. I know in the past when I've brought on team members, my husband has almost had to be the in-between, because I'm like, well, I know what I want, but to convey that or to know how to articulate or have other people step in, I'm not really sure where I need the support or what to have them do or how to convey exactly what it is that I need. And I think that was just a little insecurity on my part of, I didn't want to see myself as like the CEO. Like you said, it is such a mindset shift, and it is such a crucial part where if you don't do that first, you're almost going to be like a fellow team member with your team. You're going to be like, oh, hey, like find someone else to be the boss that we can talk about. Like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the leader. And so, yeah, I echo that. I think it's really important that shift happens first. And I think it's really challenging. I think it's one of the hardest things that people do is shift from operator into owner, because there are so many pieces of that have felt so personal, that have felt like it's on you, it's your responsibility. And so even as you're doing that, like maybe give us some tips or some micro strategies at what you can do as you bring people on to start. Like, what are some of the first things that are great to let go of, especially in service-based businesses where maybe you're just creating content offers, you're the brain. What do you start outsourcing first? How do you have other people help you to shift out of operator?
Yeah. Oh my God, I love what you just said. Because there's so much there, right? Like this is about safety, really on the deepest level. And there is a lot of safety and control, or a seeming safety and control. Like when I hang on to everything and I do everything myself, I feel safe. So we have to rewire that belief. And there's many different ways we can do that on a practical level. And I'll talk about the external too, because I know you asked about that. Like, what do we outsource first? But this is really the thing. It's like the thing nobody wants to talk about, but I'm like, it's really internal. I have an exercise that I will have people do that I think is super useful and practical. So I tell my clients to do this, and I do this as well every morning and every night. And you can spend 5 minutes doing this. It's very quick. So you close your eyes, and this is like a visualization. And you imagine your life today, or you imagine a scale, let's say from 1 to 10. And you imagine your life today as if it were 5 on that scale. So you can close your eyes and you just imagine level 5. And you see yourself moving through your day as level 5 and see what you're doing and how your calendar's structured and where you're spending your time. And you might spend 30 seconds just visualizing that. And then you move up to level 7. Maybe level 7 is you as this like really embodied leader CEO. And you see how you move through your day and the decisions that you make and how you lead and what you're spending your time doing. And also how you feel on the inside. And then you might go back to level 3 and you might think, okay, well, where was I like a year ago? And how was I showing up in my business a year ago? I remember level 3. I was building thumbnails on the weekend. I got really stressed and I was like, I need to redo all of my YouTube thumbnails, but I'm going to do them all myself because I'm attached to control. So I spent like 12 hours on a weekend redoing YouTube thumbnails. That was me at level 3. So what this exercise does is it gives you awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, on what level 7 or level 6 or level 8 or wherever you're leveling up to actually looks like. Because that's the first thing we need is we just need to understand and be aware of like, what does it actually feel like to be a leader? And you can visualize this. And then also, what does it feel like when I'm in level 3 or level 5? Like, what am I stepping out of? And so I do this every morning, and then every night what I'll do is I'll just reflect on my day and I'll say, where was I at level 7 and where was I at level 5 and where was I at level 3? And so if level 7 is me as a 7-figure business owner and level 3 is me making 6 figures, now I have awareness and I can, as I move through my day, start to show up with a different identity. That will naturally lead to different decisions. You'll be doing something and you'll stop and you'll say, is this level 7 right now? No. Me doing this, building the landing page is not level 7. I should probably go out there and find somebody to do this work for me because there's other things that I should be doing that are higher leverage uses of my time. So that's a super practical exercise. On the external, what do you actually outsource first? I talk about this idea of the value ladder, which is not like a new concept. But if you imagine a ladder and there are different rungs on the ladder, if you imagine like the bottom rung of the ladder, those are the things that you could outsource to somebody else for the least amount of money. So let's say $10 an hour tasks. These are things like scheduling content on social media, replying to customer support emails, things that you're probably spending a couple hours a week or more. Most entrepreneurs are spending a couple hours a week or more doing things that you could literally just hand off to someone for $10 an hour. And on the top of the ladder, we've got things that are $1,000 an hour plus tasks. Things like high-level strategy or hiring or leading your team or maybe selling or being on a live webinar or something like this. This is a very high leverage use of my time right now because I know I can speak to many people at once through getting on a podcast like this. So this is like a high value use of my time. So what I ask people to do when I mentor and work with them is we basically just draw out this value ladder in their business. And I ask them to basically just put out, okay, if there are 5 different rungs in your business, what's the stuff on the bottom and what's the stuff on the top and what's the stuff in the middle? And then we just start from the bottom up and we just start pulling things off the bottom. And usually the first hire people will make is like a general VA or someone like that to just take a lot of the admin stuff off their plate. From a mindset perspective, the thing that's going to stop you from doing this as an entrepreneur is you're going to tell yourself the story, I don't have enough money,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't have the cash flow to be able to support hiring somebody. I'm not making it, like things are tight, or we're not making enough money. So why does it make sense to hire someone? And the reframe is the only way that you make more money in a business is by getting you out of low value tasks so that you can spend more of your time focused on things that are going to make you more money. So if you're spending 10 hours a week doing $10 an hour tasks, you're not spending those 10 hours doing things that are going to make you $500 an hour or $1,000 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So for most entrepreneurs, the challenging thing is we got to put the cart before the horse. In order to make more money, we've got to get you out of the weeds. So if you've got 2 or 3 months of expenses in the bank to be able to hire a VA, which you can literally hire a great VA for $15 an hour, and they can work part-time, maybe 5 or 10 hours a week. So I don't know how much money that is a month. I can't do that in my head, but we're talking maybe like $1,000 a month. It's not a huge amount of money. You should do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait until you have more money, because you're not going to be able to make more money in your business until you get out of the weeds.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there, but those are some mindset shifts as well as some practical steps that people can take.
Well, and honestly, the mindset shifts lead to the practical steps, right? Like those are really good recommendations. And I love the ladder analogy because I think a lot of times we're not even aware of that there are things that we could be outsourcing to other people because we've convinced ourselves that we're working, right? So working is good. I have done so many low ladder tasks for months. And it's like, well, mom's working, mom's in here working. And at the end of the month, it's like, what did I even produce from that work that I was doing that whole time? And so it's you have to acknowledge, like, if you want to have a job, if you want to sit there and work in the business like that, expect to make hourly wage money. Like you're not going to make the huge cash that you want to in your business unless you're willing to let go of that. And when you said the mindset shift that has to happen and you have that identity shift, I know I experienced that the very first part of stepping into online entrepreneurship when I first listened to the first iteration of Millionaire University, which was 8 Minute Millionaire. And I was like, oh my gosh, like when I believe that I'm a millionaire, how does a millionaire act? How does a millionaire spend her time? All of the things. What does she read, listen to? That was the huge shift. And so I think the identity shift will actually contribute to knowing what the habits are, what the actions are that you need to take. Because yeah, when I saw myself as a 7-figure earner, there were a lot of things that I stopped doing, even on a basic human level. Like 7-figure earners don't sit there and binge Netflix all weekend. They are working or they're playing hard because they worked hard. So I love that. That's so powerful. And it's really important distinction to make. I know though, we're
Can
also
I just hop
talking
in?
about, yeah.
I just want to hop in because what you just said is literally, that's the answer. Like I
Yeah.
got chills as you were saying that because people focus on the outside without
Yeah.
changing the inside. And when you become the kind of person, when you hold the identity, like just like what you talked about, being the 7-figure entrepreneur, the steps will unfold naturally
Mm-hmm.
because the behaviors, the actions that we take always are in a perfect match to our identity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the highest leverage thing. If you want to know like the big secret, it's be the 7-figure entrepreneur on the inside and then just show up. And
Mm-hmm.
your brain will figure out the rest. It will figure out how to delegate. It will figure out what things you need to be doing and what things you shouldn't be doing when you assume that identity first.
Yeah. Yep. You and I are probably both living proof of that. And I will sing that from the rooftops till the day I die. It's what I teach my clients too. Like it's so imperative that you have that internal shift before the external starts to line up. That being said, I know that our listeners, until you have that, we all still want the strategy. We all still want to know some of the nitty gritty too. So one of the things that we wanted to dive into that we have been diving into is really the other points of leverage. And I know that there's probably other things that we could discuss here. Maybe leading people and having a lot of employees is not really the first point of leverage. Maybe there's a different way that you're spending your time. So what do you speak to on that if you don't want to have, like maybe you want a really lean team, you just want to have one VA, but you do want to make more money. What does that look like? Give us some other kind of approaches beyond just hiring a whole team of people.
Yeah, so you definitely don't need a big team. I mean, in our business today, I make about a little over $500,000 a year, and I have 2, maybe 3 like part-time contractor employees.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anyone full-time. So you don't, I think that's the first thing just to myth bust. We don't need like a massive team. I
Yeah.
think there's different ways to create leverage. And one way is through team, but it's not the only way. But I'll just speak to my own business. Like we do a lot, I do a lot of, when I was going from 0 to 6 figures, if we just zoom in on marketing, a lot of what I was doing was a lot of one-to-one conversations. So my marketing strategy was I would add 50 coaches a day on Facebook and 25 of them would accept on average. And I had a VA on my team at the time who would send like an intro message like, hey, I like your work. And then I would go in and I just have conversations with people. So I was spending hours a week in the DMs, and then I would invite those people to a phone call and I'd have phone calls with them. So a lot of calls.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me to 5 to 10K a month. But obviously it's not scalable and it's not very leveraged. So when I started growing beyond that point, and there's different ways I could have grown, I could have said, hey, let me hire a team of people to scale this whole outreach strategy. And there's people out there who do that, where you've got 3 or 4 or 5 people doing outreach for you. And that's one model. Another model is how do I move from one-to-one conversations to one-to-many so I can communicate with more people at once while still spending the same amount of time. So as an example, what I was doing in the early days was a lot of those one-to-one conversations, but I started shifting my focus to doing more live trainings and doing more stuff like this, where I can get on a podcast and, have a conversation with many people at once. Still an hour of my time, but instead of spending it talking to one person, I can spend it talking to thousands of people. So
Mm-hmm.
I started leveraging things like paid traffic so that I could trade my money for attention instead of my time for attention. So I created more leverage that way. So I think there's many different ways to create leverage in a business that don't necessarily involve you hiring team. Some of the ways that we just talked about, one-to-many type marketing, that's one way of doing it. Same thing with delivery. If you're running like a one-to-one model, shifting to group delivery where you're running some kind of a group program, which is what I did when I started scaling. We launched a group program. I don't need a big team to run that group program, but it allows me to serve many more people at once without necessarily needing a big team to deliver. So I think there are different ways to do it. One is shifting the way that you show up in your business from one-to-one to one-to-many, leveraging things like ads and paid traffic that are going to allow you to trade your money for attention instead of your time for attention. And I'm really excited about AI too, because I think there's a ton of potential there when we look at automation and how do we create more leverage around your time. It's been a huge driver for me in the last few months. So I think there's a ton of opportunity there. And so we've talked about a couple different ways that you can
Yeah.
grow and scale a business without necessarily needing to hire more people to be able to
Mm-hmm.
help you to do that.
Yeah. And to be clear for everyone, this is scale. Like I would never recommend, I shouldn't say never because I've actually done this, but I wouldn't typically recommend just turning ads on instead of validating and getting all the messaging and everything clear. So yeah, these are like the next strategies that help you move out of the weeds and those lower level things. And even just, I love that. So we've got so many different ways that you can approach this. You can outsource some of the output in terms of the tasks that you're doing. You can outsource in different ways the marketing. You can change the marketing message. You can really, I love that because we brought on people who would go one direction where they create more of the agency model. They're going to hire people that are going to do more of the outreach. And I love that there's really no wrong approach to this. I think it's just finding what do you really want? What feels really good to you? And what type of a business do you want to build? I think a lot of times we just follow the guru. We're just like, okay, well, that's the only way to do this. And that's, I think, how you end up in burnout, right? Because you follow strategies that don't actually align with the type of business that you want to build. And when it's service-based, you do have to make sure that there's alignment there and that it feels good and it lights you up. Otherwise, it's going to start to feel like this obligatory thing where maybe you're thinking, I don't want to have more people getting into DMs because I literally can't get on more phone calls. And I also don't want to have sales reps. I don't want to have to be managing that kind of a team. I would rather just be able to speak to more people. So I'm going to change the way that I show up. So I love that. You've given us a good variety of things that we can focus on to start leveraging our time differently, even introducing the group model, being able to coach multiple people at the same time. I know this is like one of the best ways if you're in the service-based industry, leveraging passive offers, things like that. Anything else you would add to that in terms of after you've applied the leverage, what else needs to shift in order for you to start increasing the income as well with the business?
We touched a little bit on messaging. You mentioned messaging, and what I often see behind the scenes when we're talking about up leveling a business and scaling a business is the messaging and the clientele actually needs to shift and change. Generally, like when I was in the early days as a business coach, I was working primarily with new business owners doing one-to-one. People needed more hand-holding because they were near to business, and it makes sense. I mean, you've got if you've never launched a business before, there's just more challenges that you run into. Not to say that, you can't create success, but it does lead to like a higher intimacy type model. And as I grew and scaled my business, I started working with more established entrepreneurs, helping people scale past 6 figures. I started shifting from being this kind of ground floor type support person for folks to more of a high level strategist thought partner, working with people who are more self-led, who could take a strategy and just run with it and didn't need as much mindset support on the ground level. And that also shifted back into my messaging, really being able to call forward that higher level client. And I want to be clear when I say that. I don't mean that there's anything wrong with people who are new. When I say higher level, I literally just mean people who are in business longer. So I think when we look at the constraints in a business, and there are so many, the first thing is scale is oftentimes what scale is really about is removing constraints. That's kind of how I think about it. It's like your business wants to grow. Growth is a natural state. It's like when you put an acorn in the ground and you give it the right water and you give it the right conditions, it naturally wants to grow into a tree. The same thing applies for your business. And so when we look at what's holding the business back from growth, it's really more about removing constraints than it is about anything else. And so one of the other constraints you'll often find is we're attracting clients who might need a lot of hand-holding or just are expecting a certain type of delivery experience that creates this constraint around your delivery model. So being able to shift the messaging to call in that person who is more self-led, who needs less hand-holding, who might be further along on their journey, who you can generally charge more with too. Those are often some keys as well to help unlock that next level of growth for folks.
Ooh, I'm so glad you touched on that. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you are in the service spaces. The audience is going to shift and they're going to grow as you grow. You can totally stay in that space of just nurturing the beginners. You can stay in that for forever, honestly. There's a lot of people who speak to the same audiences for a decade. They sell the exact same offer for a decade. But I think in terms of like, as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we want to level up, we want to scale and grow. And that is something that can shift alongside you, is when you are working with a different, and yeah, I hate to use the word levels too, like that level up, but really when you're working with people who need a different level of support, it really can free you up. I've experienced this not even in the coaching space, but in the service provision space. It is so much easier to build, say, for example, a quiz funnel. This is something I've done for years and years. For somebody who already knows who their audience is, they already have emails, they already understand what they're doing in their business, versus somebody who's just stepping in. They don't even for sure know what they're going to sell yet. They're not sure who they're talking to. My work became a million times easier when I shifted who I was working for and who I was building that offer for. It was a night and day difference. It was so much less preparation. It was so much less back and forth. And so I think that's a really important leverage thing, a leverage point that you brought up too, where it's not a right or wrong thing. You can continue to serve whatever audience you want, but just keep that in mind that if you're right now working where it feels like, oh my gosh, it is so many steps to help finish this offer, finish with this client, it's totally okay to say, maybe I'm just going to kind of trim down what I offer. And I'm only going to meet people, I think of it like a river. I'm going to meet them here on the river instead of way down there on the river or way up there. And then it completely shifts the way that you are able to show up as a service provider, a coach, whatever it may be. So yeah, I think that's really invaluable advice. There's so many options here. There's so many, and I think that's freedom, right? That's real freedom in entrepreneurship, not feeling like your business should never be golden handcuffs. It shouldn't feel like, well, this is the only way that I can do it because it's the only way I've known. I think just shifting into acknowledging, and you've done such a great job of conveying that for us. There are many, many doors that are available to you. And it's just a matter of getting curious and saying, okay, if I want to make more money and I don't want to do more work, what does this have to look like? What are my options available to me? So thank you so much for all of that, because it's been so incredibly helpful to just open our brains up a little bit, crack open the shell.
You got it. It's fun to jam, and I
Yeah.
love getting to connect with other entrepreneurs. So it's been a pleasure.
Amazing. Jason, if people want to continue to connect with you, if they are service providers, they want to learn more about how you help and actually get some implementation support for this, where's the best place for them to go to get started?
I go to jasonmoss.com. That's my website and hub for all things what I do. We've got a link to our YouTube channel. We've got a great scaling guide lead magnet that you can check out and download, and check out our funnel and see what we're doing so you can steal it for yours. And lots of workshops and live events that I run as well, where you can dive deeper. So that would be a great place to go to check out and explore more.
Amazing. Thank you again so much for giving us all the insight you have. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, likewise, you too.
Thank you.